In 1803, the United States made one of the biggest bargains in history. It did not happen on a battlefield. It did not begin with a grand plan to own half a continent. And at first, America was not even trying to buy all that land. All Thomas Jefferson really wanted was one city, New Orleans. But what America got instead was something much bigger. It was offered a massive stretch of land that nearly doubled the size of the country, reshaped the map of North America, and changed the lives of millions of people forever. This is the story of the Louisiana Purchase, the $15 million deal that changed America. At the beginning of the 1800s, the United States was still a young nation. It had only recently won independence from Britain, and its future was not guaranteed. Most of its towns and cities were still close to the Atlantic coast, but more and more settlers were moving inland, across the Appalachian Mountains and into places like Kentucky, Tennessee, and the Ohio River Valley. These western farmers were hard-working, but they had a serious problem. They could grow crops and raise animals, but getting their goods to market was difficult. Roads were rough, travel was slow, and moving heavy loads over mountains was expensive. For many farmers, the best option was not a road at all. It was a river. The Mississippi River was like a giant highway made of water. Farmers could load barrels of flour, grain, tobacco, cotton, pork, and other goods onto boats, then float them downriver. The current would carry them south toward New Orleans, where their goods could be sold and shipped to other places. So for Western farmers, the Mississippi was not just a river, it was their connection to money, trade, and survival. If the river stayed open, their communities could grow. But if another country blocked access to the river, those farmers could be trapped. Their crops could sit unsold, their income could disappear, and their future could be controlled by a foreign power. New Orleans was the key. The city sat near the mouth of the Mississippi River, close to where the river emptied into the Gulf of Mexico. Whoever controlled New Orleans controlled the doorway between the western farms and the wider world. At first, New Orleans and the Louisiana Territory were controlled by Spain. The United States had worked out arrangements with Spain so American goods could move through the port. It was not perfect, but it worked well enough. Then, everything changed. Spain handed Louisiana back to France, and France was led by one of the most powerful men in the world, Napoleon Bonaparte. For American leaders, this was alarming. Spain had been one thing, but Napoleon's France was another. Napoleon was ambitious, powerful, and already changing Europe through war and conquest. If he controlled Louisiana, the United States might have a strong French empire sitting right beside it. Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the United States, knew he had to act. He did not want war with France. He did not want the Mississippi River blocked, and he did not want Western farmers to lose their connection to trade. So Jefferson decided on diplomacy. He would try to buy New Orleans. Jefferson sent American diplomats to France. Robert Livingston was already serving as the American minister there, and James Monroe was sent to join him. Their mission was clear: negotiate with Napoleon's government and try to buy New Orleans, possibly with some nearby land around it. That alone would have been a major deal. New Orleans was the port America desperately needed. If the United States could control that city, Western farmers could keep using the Mississippi River safely. But when Livingston and Monroe arrived in France, they discovered that Napoleon's plans were changing. Napoleon had once dreamed of rebuilding French power in North America. Louisiana could have been part of that dream. It was huge, full of possibility, and strategically important, but controlling land on a map and actually defending it are two very different things. France was facing the possibility of more war in Europe, and war cost enormous amounts of money. At the same time, France had suffered serious setbacks in the Caribbean, especially in Saint-Domingue, which is now Haiti. Without that important Caribbean base, Louisiana became less useful to Napoleon. It was far away, difficult to defend, and vulnerable if Britain and France went to war again. So Napoleon began to see Louisiana differently, not as the heart of a future French empire in America, but as land he could sell for money. When the American diplomats arrived hoping to buy New Orleans, they received a shocking offer. France was not only willing to sell New Orleans, France was willing to sell the entire Louisiana Territory. Livingston and Monroe were stunned. They had not been sent to buy land that would nearly double the size of the United States. They did not know exactly how Jefferson would react, but they understood one thing very clearly. This chance might never come again. If they waited too long, Napoleon could change his mind. So the diplomats made a bold decision. They accepted the offer. The price was $15 million. That was a huge amount of money at the time, but for the amount of land the United States received, it became one of the most famous bargains in history. The Louisiana Territory covered around 828,000 square miles, stretching from the Mississippi River westward toward the Rocky Mountains, and from the Gulf of Mexico northward toward what is now Canada. For $15 million, the United States gained a territory so large that many Americans could barely imagine it. The price worked out to only a few cents per acre. The deal was signed in 1803, and with signatures on paper, the map of the United States changed dramatically. Before the Louisiana Purchase, the United States was mostly east of the Mississippi River. After the Purchase, the country stretched far beyond it. In one agreement, the United States nearly doubled in size. It gained control of New Orleans, secured access to the Mississippi River, and opened the door to westward expansion. To many Americans, it seemed like an incredible victory. The United States had gained a huge amount of land without going to war. It had protected Western trade and given itself room to grow. But the purchase also raised serious questions, especially for Thomas Jefferson himself. Jefferson believed in a strict reading of the Constitution. He believed the federal government should only do what the Constitution clearly allowed. But the Constitution did not clearly say that the president had the power to buy a massive territory from another country. That put Jefferson in an awkward position. He had always argued for limited government, but now he had a chance to do something enormous, something that would change the future of the nation. In the end, Jefferson moved forward. The Senate approved the treaty, and the Louisiana Purchase became official. Jefferson chose the opportunity, but buying the land was only the beginning. The United States had just purchased a huge territory that many of its leaders did not fully understand. Maps were incomplete. Boundaries were unclear. Much of the land was unfamiliar to Americans living in the East. They did not fully know what rivers crossed it, what mountains stood in the distance, or what routes connected one region to another. And most importantly, the land was not empty. Native American nations had lived across these regions for generations. They had their own communities, languages, histories, trade networks, spiritual connections, and ways of life. To the United States government, the Louisiana Purchase looked like a huge opportunity, but to many Native peoples, it would become part of a much larger story of pressure, broken promises, land loss, forced removal, and conflict. After the purchase, Jefferson wanted to learn more about the new territory, so he supported an expedition that became one of the most famous journeys in American history, the Lewis and Clark expedition. Meriwether Lewis and William Clark led a group called the Corps of Discovery. Their mission was to explore the land, map routes, study plants and animals, record what they saw, and look for possible connections across the continent. The journey was difficult and dangerous. The expedition traveled along rivers, crossed plains, faced rough terrain, and moved through areas unfamiliar to them. One of the most famous people connected to the expedition was Sacagawea, a young Shoshone woman whose knowledge, language skills, and presence became important to the journey. The expedition helped Americans imagine the West more clearly, but it also marked the beginning of a much larger movement westward. The Louisiana Purchase changed the way Americans saw their country. Before the Purchase, the United States was a young nation still finding its place. After the Purchase, it began to imagine itself as a country with a vast continental future. For many settlers, the new land represented opportunity. It meant farms, towns, trade routes, roads, and new states. But for Native American nations, westward expansion often meant danger. More settlers meant more pressure. More pressure meant more conflict. More government interest meant more treaties, and many of those treaties would later be broken or ignored. So the Louisiana Purchase had two sides. It was a huge success for the United States government, but it also intensified the struggle over land and power in North America. So why does the Louisiana Purchase still matter? First, it gave the United States control over New Orleans and helped secure trade along the Mississippi River. That was Jefferson's original goal, and it was extremely important for Western farmers. Second, it nearly doubled the size of the United States. In one agreement, the country gained a huge amount of land and completely changed its future map. Third, it encouraged westward expansion. The idea of America stretching across the continent became more powerful than ever. Fourth, it led to exploration, especially through the Lewis and Clark expedition. And fifth, it deeply affected Native American nations. The land may have been sold by France, but native peoples were already living there. Their futures were changed by a deal they did not control. The Louisiana Purchase began with a river, a port city, and a problem. American farmers needed the Mississippi River. Jefferson needed New Orleans. Napoleon needed money. And in one unexpected moment, all of those needs came together. America asked for a city. France offered a territory. And the United States bought a future. For $15 million, the United States bought a territory so vast that it nearly doubled the size of the country.